Welcome to Revolution Against Evolution. I'm your host, Doug Sharp.
Your co-host, Rich Gear, here as well. And Doug, we're going to talk about your little adventure, aren't we?
Yeah, I had a nice little trip to Honduras, to the island of Utila, and we're going to also touch a little bit about the climate change, because there's a few things that we observed there that pertain to that. So I'd like to describe a little bit of my adventure in the island of Utila. Utila is the smallest of the Bay Islands in Honduras in the Caribbean, and it has about a population of about 10,000. And it's the other two islands are Roatan and Guanaja, and Utila is sort of a scuba diving destination, and this has beautiful beaches and a mangrove jungle.
They finally went down there because of your daughter and son-in-law, right? Because they like to scuba dive, right?
Yeah, that's how I ended up down there. I decided, since they bought some property on the island, I had to go down and inspect it. And so I went down there, and this was the first time my grandchildren had the chance to travel there too. And so the purpose was that they were going to get certified in scuba diving. The first few days were spent doing just that. Where they were taking the lessons. There was a lot of book work, as well as then getting into the water and actually doing some diving. And the oldest granddaughter, after a couple of days, after the second day, decided that it wasn't for her. She didn't like scuba diving. But the youngest, well, she's the firecracker in the bunch. Of the two, Kayla, she got scuba certified, and so it was kind of an interesting time. It almost started out with a problem in that my daughter, Linda, got into the water the first day. We were jumping off the dock into the water, and she swims out a little ways, and all of a sudden she says, "I got stung," and it was a box jellyfish. And those things are pretty nasty, and in fact they could be fatal. And so she got out.
Another reason I'm not going in down there. I'm not a big scuba diver fan. I don't like anything going underwater like that at all.
Yeah. I got certified at an advanced hammock.
Advanced hammock, yeah. So you would have fit in with the natives. The island, you said, is pretty laid back, right?
It was pretty laid back, and I just spent my time relaxing down there, and it was kind of an interesting time. But it was really a different life that I experienced down there. The people of Utila are of African, English, and Dutch descent. And it's a pretty laid-back environment. There's no chain restaurants on the island, but there's people who have the dive shops open, have their own little food service, and they have. There's other people who have restaurants on the island, and they just open when they feel like it. And so it's just kind of a different life. People get around on mopeds and scooters, and they take a three-wheeled taxi that they call a tuk-tuk. And that's kind of an experience. The streets are narrow. There's actually one main street that goes through the town, and then there's a couple side streets. But
that's about it, huh?
That's about it, and it's you just have this whole community of people that probably grew up there, and they're all related to each other, cousins and everything. And so it's kind of a different lifestyle. Local attire is pretty much bathing suits, because the weather is pretty hot and humid.
Yeah, what's the low you probably get down there?
80.
80?
Yeah, and it's between 80 and 88 degrees, but it's probably 80% humidity too. So
Yeah, especially if you get in the interior at all. Well, is the town located next to the beach, or is it kind of in?
it's right along the bay.
Okay.
Now the island is sort of split into two different parts. There's the eastern end, which is where we were staying, and then we were at the dive shop. The dive shop has some places you can stay, and it was like $50 a night for the better room, which has air conditioning, but it's pretty basic. And then the room, and that's up on the top floor, so like a 3-story place on stilts. And then the second floor is where the low rent rooms are without any air conditioning. That's where some of the other people
That would be
stay.
brutal.
So they do have fans, and it's but it's a pretty basic lifestyle. And my daughter and son-in-law bought some property on the other side of the island, which is on the western end. And so our whole idea was we're going to go over there and inspect the property for ourselves and see how it's doing. And my son-in-law had gone down there earlier this year, and he had actually cleared away a lot of the underbrush. But when we got back there, and we took the day, and it's actually to get to the spot, you have to take a water taxi because there's a lagoon that separates this part of the island from the rest of it. And there's no bridge over the little isthmus where you go across. And so we took the water taxi over there, and the jungle had all grown back.
Yeah.
And so he had planted some fruit trees and some palm trees, and a couple of palm trees had died, but
What do you want to grow? Don't grow, and then.
but mango tree has gotten pretty big, but there's all this undergrowth that just grew out all over it, and so it's. I think what they've decided to do is that because they've taken up kiteboarding, and Utila really isn't a good spot for kiteboarding, that they've decided that they're probably going to sell the property.
Well, yeah, but you also said there were some other issues that they were kind of concerned about, or maybe maybe that's a peripheral thing, but it's not peripheral to what we're talking about. But the reef is deteriorating. You know, didn't you say there's some?
Yeah, but that's the whole thing. We're talking a little bit about climate change, and some of the different things that are causing the reef to deteriorate, and that was of concern to them.
It's kind of like there's some misnomers as to what causes it, even on their part, probably. But
yeah, there's a whole bunch of things going on here, and we as Christians need to be concerned about the environment. We are, and as creationists, we believe that God has given us a mandate to care for the world that God has created for us, and it's a fragile world. It's not one that's not, we can just do what we want with it and trash it out. It's something that we have to take care of, the things that God has given us. And
well, you talk about, Doug, this particular reef is protected because it's in a national park.
yeah.
But they don't really protect it all that much because of certain.
Well, what has happened is that the people who live on the island, there's a little fishing village over by on the west end where there's a bunch of little islands, and the people who live there make their living with fishing. Well, they've starting to get to be that the fish that actually help the reef to thrive is being overfished, and so there's not as many of the fish around for the divers, and so it's kind of an ironic thing is that all the dive shops, the Utila is known, I guess, the second largest reef in the Caribbean, and yet the coral is starting to whiten, and it's starting to die off, and And so where it was all just full of all these colors and everything, Linda and Ted have noticed that in the 10 years that they've been going down there, that it's been it's just changing, and it's not good. And the problem is government. Honduras is a poor country. And you can see it in the way that everything is laid out. You know, like I said, there's really nobody that has a car on the island. I think there's a few trucks that for utility purposes, but the streets are so narrow, and if you have the electricity is all this wires are going all over the place, you know, and you know they just string the power every which way.
Yeah, however they feel like doing. Okay, yeah.
And so you know, during the night we experienced a few power outages, and it was kind of distressing for me because I have a CPAP, and as I wake up and I go, having trouble breathing.
This would not be a place you'd retire to.
No, I don't think so. But it was. But the other thing was when we got to the property, the one thing we noticed was that all the trash. There was accumulation of litter on the beach. It was mostly plastic pop bottles and lots of flip-flops and junk, and it's all washed up on shore. It's floating in from somewhere, maybe the mainland. Mainland's about 20 miles off from where you are. But
does the tide flow that way? Is what
okay. And I remember when I was in Dominican Republic, the raw sewage that was around too, you know. And so there, but in terms of that, I didn't see that much of that. And the water was actually pretty clear and pretty nice. One of the things I remembered was that when I was standing up next to the dock, somebody had taken the offal from a fish that they had just cleaned and put it in the entrails of the fish, and they threw it in the water, and there was these big fish starting to come in up to the dock, you know, and they were helping themselves to the feast, and they were tarpon. I don't know if you've ever seen tarpon, but they're about this long.
Yeah, those are edible. Are those edible?
Yeah, they are quite a sport fish. Yeah,
I know they are, but can you eat them?
Yeah, and they put up a big fight if you catch one. But there was about 5 of those that were swimming around the dock, and there was a barracuda underneath the dock, and
wow.
And somebody said there was a frogfish, and they're kind of a ugly looking thing down at the bottom of the thing. So if you're swimming in that area, you have to wear some special shoes so that you don't, if you step on the coral, you don't step on a sea urchin or something like that. All these spikes and so
I was down there not down where you're at, but I was in the Caribbean down there. St. Thomas Island, and somebody stepped on one of those urchins. They're very stiff, and 45 minutes because the barbs were they're in reverse.
Oh yeah,
and you try to his foot was bloodied. It was not a fun or pleasant. It says you do not walk down there in bare feet. Nah, you do not. Yeah, and like I say, I'm not a big beachcomber guy anyway. I just never have been. It's never been my thing. You know, all you do is get burnt and greasy, and I don't care for it much. You know, and I don't like scuba diving, so you can have it, Doug. They can have a good time down there and sweat and.
Well, there were a couple of nice pristine beaches down there where the swimming was pretty nice.
Well, as you go in the water and then you come on, you feel all clammy and salty, and you got to wash yourself off with a clean water. You know, it's just,
I certainly prefer Lake Michigan. Unsalted, no sharks, no
sea urchins to step on.
Anyway.
But it has its own charm, and if you want to just look at it, it's beautiful down there, right, Doug? It's
really amazing. And I really enjoyed myself. It was a nice, quiet, relaxing time for me.
But just a little after, how did Linda do with it being stung with the
Oh, okay. She was miserable that night.
Oh,
And and she took some Benadryl, actually took some vinegar and put it on the sting.
okay.
It was all on her arm like this.
Oh my gosh.
And it was pretty dicey. She was shivering and not. She was miserable all night, but in the morning, it had pretty much vanished, and so she was. But she's a pretty tough young lady, and she's physically active, and so I think if it was me, I might have had a little bit more of a problem, But
Well, did you go in the water at all?
I did go in the water. I jumped off the dock, before Linda got stung. But after she got stung, I said, well,
I'm done with this.
maybe I'm going to just take it easy with this a little bit. And,
Okay.
But it was kind of interesting.
So, Doug, back to the thing, talk about, I said, yeah, we were starting about God to take dominion. And you tried to talk to, like, taking care of it. Because dominion is an interesting word. What is, a lot of people don't, can't just, it's not about being willy-nilly just trashing everything and using up what it's different. It's actually stewardship.
Yeah.
It's the idea of taking care of it properly. And, we as creationists do not fall into the realm of what I would call the greenies. I would say we do not worship Gaia. We worship the Creator, okay? Which means He created this world. He created it perfect. It's fallen, so there are problems with it that probably weren't there before the fall. In fact, I would guarantee they weren't there before the fall, but they are now. But the dominion mandate has not been rescinded, even with the fall, and so it means that the stuff was prepared to bless mankind. But mankind needs to watch over it, because really the animals, the plants, all the stuff, the air, it's something that we're the only ones have that power to really do much about it. Of course, the hubris, Doug, to me, of the green environment is that they can change the world worldwide. They think that everything is our fault, or everything's man-made fault, specifically Western man-made. Because China and India never take any blame for anything, and they're making more coal plants and stuff, and they never say anything about that stuff. It's only us, And then I've heard this thing, Doug, and I'm getting a little far afield, but it's dealing with the climate change issue. And the idea, we got to let them have their way because they got to catch up. I said, so what you want to do is hamstring us and penalize us for being successful, doing the right things, because the truth of the matter is, you look at it, the cleanest people in the world are the wealthy nations. The ones that are not, and of course China's coming up there, but they're still their culture is not, they're not doing anything for environmental issues at all. It's all the United States, maybe Canada, Mexico, I would say probably not so much, but England and the European nations to some extent. The wealthier nations are doing things about it. So, but the idea that the reefs, we'll get back to Utila there for a second, they're being destroyed, and who was it, somebody asked you a question, was that because the glaciers are melting, or is that because of, I can't remember, you talked about...
Yeah, I had a person ask me after I got back about if we have noticed if Linda and Ted had gone down there before, and now if that the sea level was rising because of the global warming. And it isn't. Really, there's no noticeable change there. But, and this is a big misconception. And I did some back-of-the-envelope calculations.
Would you call it a myth-conception?
A myth-conception,
okay.
Yes. Myth.
Yeah.
But I did some back-of-the-envelope calculations about that this afternoon. And if you take the volume of the ocean, it's 321 million cubic miles. Okay.
Oh, okay.
And then let's take the volume of the Greenland ice pack, and let's just say it's 1 mile thick. It's 836,000 cubic miles. And so let's suppose that we have 100 feet of ice melt, and then that entire ice pack. You might get a rise of about 3 inches, which is negligible. And let's suppose you have an entire 5,280 feet of melt, a mile of melt, okay? That would cause the sea level to rise 13 and a half feet, which is still, it might be noticeable, but not that much.
Especially you're built on the coastline, like a lot of these, like people tend to do. They want to build right on the edge of the thing, so they would have to move.
But the tides are that much.
Yeah, that's a good point, Doug. And the thing is, but we've experienced glacial melt in the past.
Right.
We as creationists think that's what the ice age was a result, direct result, if you will, of the post-flood conditions of the world, and then it caused the sea levels to actually be lower, but then as things began to settle in and things began to warm up over a period of a few hundred years, there's up to 250, 300 feet. Some of the coastal, there's actually, we've talked about this before, Doug, it always fascinates me. All around the world, every time you see some new discovery of Atlantis or Lemuria or something like that, it's usually probably some civilization that was on the island during the megalithic culture. You got things that look like ancient Egypt, ancient Stonehenge, that are always about 200-300 feet below sea level, right on the coastlines. All around the world, these kinds of things happen.
Yeah, global warming is not something
it's
that's
not something new.
It's something that there was a medieval warm period.
Yes.
And then there was the little ice age that took place in the 1700s, and these are certain things that are cyclical and periodic, and they and a lot of it was aftermath of the Noah's flood. You have the big ice age that explains a lot of what the climate was after Noah's flood, because the oceans were warm.
Yeah.
But you had a sort of like a weather engine that piled up snow on the interiors.
Yep.
And so you had a whole different set of climate, and you had actually a lowering of the sea level during that time because of the everything being piled up on the continents. And so you had the continental glaciers, and you had the land bridges, such as the Bering Strait and in the like in the Indonesia area, that was all a land bridge going over to Australia, and so you had these factors in our past that is explained very well by a biblical model.
A biblical model, and that's the big thing about this whole environmental thing. It's based on a Darwinian deep time scenario, and there was interesting with the IPCC. I don't remember what the initials are, but there've been. I read this article you sent me, Doug, and it was very interesting. There was 5 different scenarios or modeling, and every one of them fails.
Right.
And yet they still hold on to this environmental stuff. And I go, look, and I've said this for years, Doug. You can't even hardly predict the weather a month in advance. How are you going to know what's going to be like 50 years from now or 100 years from now? And a lot of the stuff they talk about, it's like, we remember the times when they believed the world was going to be global cooling. Anybody who's old enough remembers the 70s. We thought, man, that we're going to get another little mini ice age. And then it switched. And then
if you lived through the winter of 77 and 78, or the winter of 67, you knew that
the other thing,
the whole ice age was coming.
And when you tell them this kind of thing, they go, well, it's been cooler the last year. Well, weather is not climate. I said, yeah, unless it is when you guys get your warm weather. Then suddenly it is part of global warming. There's all kinds of things, Doug, that these kind of people talk out of both sides of their mouth.
Right.
And yet that does not eliminate the mandate to be a good steward of the earth. We're not supposed. I think it's a good thing that Lake Erie is cleaned up. You know, that used to be trash. They were dumping raw sewage for 50, 70 years into that, and it's a big Great Lake, but it's the shallowest of the Great Lakes. But now, they were able to clean things up in regional, you can do things regional, like Los Angeles and the smog. I think those are kind of, okay, let's get...
Yeah, we're benefiting from the efforts to clean up this
but to say that
environment.
you could change the whole world by telling the United States you basically got to eliminate fossil fuels is a joke, okay? And it's not biblical. It's based on fear. It's not based upon the idea that God himself is actually in control of this thing.
We revere the God of creation.
Yes.
And some of the relevant principles are that the universe and the earth were created through and for Jesus Christ. The earth was created for mankind. We are called to be holy and blameless in Jesus Christ. Christ holds his creation together, and mankind is called to steward God's creation. We're to worship the Creator, not the creation, or Gaia or Mother Earth. And we have a responsibility to look after the environment. We are compelled to say God is our creator. He made this area for us, and we are to tend the garden that he planted for us. And so I think, the climate change is a political, complicated, and full of misinformation. I mean, that must not be distracted from our mission of making this world a better place. Instead, figure out what kind of government the kingdom of God needs to be like.
But don't be operating in a position of fear. There is a person who is in control. The God of the universe is in control. He has delegated certain things to us. We have certain kinds of powers. But ultimately, do we defer to his wisdom and his guidance to tell us where to go, how to do things?
If a person is a committed Christian, they must also be committed to the mandate God has given by God to care for the world he set up for man to take dominion. And this includes bringing God's kingdom to the point where it operates the way he originally designed it. And so Utila gives us a little bit of a lesson about this. We see that there's plenty of things that we need to do in order to make this place like God's kingdom.
Yep.
We'll see you next time on Revolution Against Evolution.